Hey everyone, welcome to Alt-Worldly Smooth Face Edition. The governing body just released a COVID-19 update to their website. This is the first update they've released of 2022. If you're unfamiliar, they tend to release an update every couple of months. They've done this ever since the pandemic started, and generally the purpose of them is to just kind of inform the members of Jehovah's Witnesses what's going on with the witness community in relation to the pandemic, and what they should do, how they can be encouraged, and generally, they are very cringe. They have given us goals such as this, for example.
So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
That was 2 years ago, fun fact. So I haven't watched this. I'm going to be watching and reacting in real time. But if I watch something by myself and don't record it and make content out of it, did it even really happen? So here we go. Let's watch it.
Welcome to this update. The Omicron variant of the COVID-19 virus has quickly spread throughout the world. The number of cases has exploded. We're saddened to report that as of Friday, January 21st, 26,813 of our brothers have now died from COVID-19. But there have been some encouraging developments. For those who are vaccinated, cases of Omicron are generally milder and have not led to hospitalization or death. For example, you may have heard reports that there has been a major outbreak of Omicron in Puerto Rico. You may also know that Puerto Rico has a very high rate of vaccination. Although 551 cases were reported among our brothers during the recent outbreak, only 3 of our brothers have died, and it is our understanding that all of them had serious underlying health issues.
Generally, we like to have fun on this channel, but this is genuinely, sincerely a tragedy. It's awful to hear that so many witnesses have died, and I have to say, it really is surprising because Watchtower has been very consistent in following like CDC and World Health Organization guidelines. Ever since the start of the pandemic, they were really on the ball with like social distancing, closing down Kingdom Halls, and they still have not opened them up worldwide, although there are a couple pilot programs where they've opened them up to a limited capacity. Maybe we'll hear more about that later in the update. I don't know. So, why are so many witnesses dying? There was a letter that was released to a body of elders, which hopefully I can show on the screen here, which did state that witnesses seem to be dying at a disproportionate rate to the rest of the population. Witnesses do have a very large population of older individuals and especially poor individuals who probably don't have great access to healthcare, so that probably accounts for the disproportionate amount. I don't have anything snarky to say. This just sucks. I did think it was a little strange that Kenneth Cook, the governing body member giving this talk, went out of his way to mention that the people who had died of COVID in Puerto Rico all had underlying health conditions, because why would that matter? Aren't we just sad that they died?
Only 3 of our brothers have died, and it is our understanding that all of them had serious underlying health issues.
Witnesses have a big anti-vaxxer problem. As it turns out, when you curate a religion based around mistrusting authority and scientists, you get a lot of people who don't believe in scientists and people in positions of authority who know how diseases work and how they spread and how to stop them. It also turns out that when you have a religion that's based around dreams in the Bible being interpreted to mean that in 1919 Jesus invisibly appointed Jehovah's Witnesses, and specifically the governing body / the faithful indiscreet slave, as his chosen mouthpieces on earth, when you have a religion like that, and maybe it also teaches that Satan is invisibly pulling the strings of human history because he rules the world and is in control of all the world's governments and stuff, that apparently attracts a lot of conspiracy theorists. So there are a lot of people in the witness community, I can attest, You'll just have to trust me. I can't out my sources, but there are a lot of people who are very upset about vaccine mandates. So I think the reason why Kenneth Cook is stating this is kind of to placate the audience of his who are anti-vaxxers or at the very least vaccine skeptical. Kenneth Cook kind of has to find a way to soothe his members, like, don't, Bill Gates isn't tracking you. Actually, he probably already is, but that's just because you're on the internet already watching this right now. You're on the internet. You lost a long time ago.
In addition to the pandemic, it has been sobering to watch recent world events unfold. We see one natural disaster after another, and we hear threats of war. The king of the north and the king of the south continue pushing one another.
Okay, if you're not familiar with recent witness theology, this is all very confusing stuff. When he's talking about the king of the north and the king of the south battling, he is talking about prophesied kings of the north and south in the Bible, which represent the United States / Europe and the West generally, and the king of the north is Russia and its allies, which, when you think about it, means that in the Bible, Vladimir Putin and Joseph Robinette Biden, they were prophesied. They're kind of in the Bible. That's got to be a big ego boost for those guys. But when you're a witness, this is all just common knowledge, and he can just toss off like, hey, we see the king of the north and the king of the south fighting, and everyone's just like, yeah, we totally do. They say this also like it's a recent development, as if the United States and Russia weren't already at war for a long time. Famously, a Cold War, some have described it as. But yeah, that prophecy is just being fulfilled now.
When we hear all these things happening in the world, it reminds us how vital it is that we keep on the watch. We need to stay awake spiritually
and not doze off or get distracted.
Why? Because we are living in the most critical time in human history. Jesus knew that the last days would bring challenges that would test our spiritual focus.
Out of his deep love, he urged his followers.
So more talk about the last days. Now, the thing with end-time predictions and Jesus' words about the last days is that they can be applied to literally every time in human history, because everybody thinks that they are living in the most significant time in human history. Nobody looks around and thinks, you know what's not important? The era that I'm living in right now. That's why Jesus' disciples thought that the end was coming in their day, because Jesus said that it would. Certainly the Apostle Paul thought the end was coming any day now. It would have made a lot of sense for people in 1918 to think that the end was coming any day, as the witnesses did, because the pandemic in 1918 killed 50 million people and infected somewhere around 500 million people worldwide, according to the CDC website. COVID-19, according to the World Health Organization, as of the recording today, has killed about 5 million people, which is a ton of people. Bad when people die. Let's just assume that is a given going forward. But the point is, this pandemic is actually less deadly than previous pandemics, because we have better healthcare, we have access to vaccines. So if the end was going to come during a time of pestilence, wouldn't it come during the time of the worst pestilence? Considering this is the thing that old Cookmeister, Kenneth Cook is his name, god damn it.
As recorded at Luke chapter 21, verses 34 through 36. But pay attention to yourselves, that your hearts never become weighed down with overeating and heavy drinking and anxieties of life.
And suddenly that day be instantly upon you as a snare. For it will come upon all those dwelling on the face of the whole earth. Keep awake then, all the time making supplication, that you may succeed in escaping all these things that must occur, and in standing before the Son of Man.
We constantly hear encouraging reports that you, dear brothers and sisters, are working hard to keep awake and remain busy in your service to Jehovah.
He's so boring.
You're busy in your personal ministry, writing letters, making phone calls, and looking for opportunities to share the good news informally. And many were able to auxiliary pioneer during the recent campaign. Staying busy in Jehovah's service is a protection for us.
Staying busy in Jehovah's service is a protection for us. I would hear this all the time as a witness. You have to stay busy. Oh, just like doing what makes me happy in life? No, in Jehovah's service. And if that doesn't make you happy, that means you got a spiritual problem. It's quite a coincidence that the way to stay safe and protected and to help yourself always seems to align with what benefits Watchtower. Specifically, it usually involves the members doing a lot of labor for free. You know, like trying to convert new members, working on Kingdom Hall projects. And this is just another example of them conflating Jehovah with themselves. The two are indistinguishable when you're a witness. If you tried to say you're just doing what the governing body tells you to do, a witness will answer, no, I'm doing what Jehovah says. And you're like, really? Where does Jehovah say you have to spend 3 hours of your Saturday writing letters? Well, it says in the Bible you have to preach the good news of the kingdom. And you're like, yeah, but since when is preaching defined as writing letters and trying to convert them to be a Jehovah's Witness? And they're like, you're an apostate and I can't talk to you anymore and I'm your dad.
But more is required to protect our hearts. It's vital for all of us to keep awake, to be watchful of things that could pose a danger to us spiritually. What are some of these dangers? Jesus mentioned things like overeating, heavy drinking, and anxieties of life. What are some ways that these things could cause our hearts to become
weighed down?
First, let's talk about one common cause for anxiety: social isolation. No doubt we have never felt as isolated as we have during this pandemic.
Oh boy, social isolation. What a problem for Jehovah's Witnesses social isolation is. I did feel particularly socially isolated during the pandemic. I recall a specific instance where I was in the hospital bleeding to death, and I was in the intensive care unit, and I needed a blood transfusion so as to not be dead. And not even my own father sent me so much as a text message because I was going to be disfellowshipped the next week. That's because Jehovah's Witnesses heavily enforce shunning. And shunning, it has been argued from time to time by some, is a form of social isolation. So make no mistake, Watchtower knows exactly what it's doing by shunning its members. It is not because they believe sincerely that the Bible demands that they engage in shunning, because when other religions do it, they're willing to say that it's bad. You hear stories all the time in the Watchtower about, when I converted to being a Jehovah's Witness, my parents refused to talk to me. And this is painted as a huge problem and a trial that the new witness had to overcome.
Shortly after my baptism, my mother came up to me and she said, "Your father and I are going out for the day. You better not be here when we get home." I was 17 years old. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know what I was going to do.
But when it applies to people who don't want to be witnesses anymore, this is Jehovah's discipline. This is one of the ways that he shows us that he loves us, by making you shun your little kids. Yeah, so I was irritated by that part of the video. You might be surprised to find out. The reality is the pandemic has been a big help to a lot of physically and mentally out people. You know, people who no longer believe and are trying to escape their religion. So on one hand, it's kind of been nice because it's been easier to fade. It's easier to not be noticed missing from the meetings when you can just sign into the Zoom meeting but turn your camera off, mute your phone, and play your Nintendo Switch and maybe play Animal Crossing, which is what I did when I was fading. At the same time, it's also devastating for anybody trying to leave because in addition to losing your family members and friends who are Jehovah's Witnesses, probably the only social structure you've ever known in your life, it's also incredibly difficult to try and form new social connections because you can't just go out to bars and meet people. It's difficult to go to parties. It's difficult to just hang out with a new friend group. So Jehovah's Witnesses' practice of shunning is absolutely social isolation, and it is something that they use intentionally to make people feel desperate enough to come back. This is more or less an admission of that.
True, it has been necessary to isolate ourselves physically to prevent the spread of COVID-19. But if we're not careful, we could start to isolate ourselves in other ways. Maybe at times we feel
Zoom fatigue.
and we even want to isolate ourselves virtually. What's the danger? Proverbs 18 verse 1 says, "Whoever isolates himself pursues his own selfish desires. He rejects all practical wisdom."
I like this proverb. Let's think about that. Whoever isolates himself is a stupid idiot. What? I immediately forgot what the verse was. Whoever isolates himself pursues his own selfish desires and rejects practical wisdom. So could that same thing apply to a community that isolates themselves? Are they rejecting practical wisdom? For example, wisdom that they just gave less than 30 seconds ago in the same talk about how social isolation is bad.
Let's talk about one common cause for anxiety, social isolation.
See, you could apply this to Jehovah's Witnesses. They famously self-isolate, isolating themselves in the spiritual paradise of God's organization. They're so isolated that people who are disfellowshipped or willingly leave don't have anybody on the outside and often have to completely relearn how to be an adult human being once they leave. You're explicitly told not to make close friends with schoolmates or workmates because they are not servants of Jehovah. They don't serve Jehovah, which means they're part of the world, which means they're bad association. They will spoil your useful habits. That is self-isolation. And even though it's 8 million people self-isolating, that doesn't make it any less isolating. So I wonder what the Proverbs man would say about that. I was going to say psalmist, and then I remembered it was a proverb, and I don't know what you'd call that kind of guy. A proverbial gentleman, perhaps? I don't know.
It takes effort to reach out to our brothers by telephone, by video conference,
or even with an email or text message.
but so often the encouragement that we receive from doing so makes the effort so worthwhile. Often, we receive back more than what we may have given. Just as Jesus said at Acts 20, verse 35, there is more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. An article on jw.org entitled, How to Deal with Isolation, made an interesting point under the heading, Cultivate Friendships. Friendships benefit your mental and emotional health and are even more important when face-to-face connections are difficult. We need our brothers and sisters, and they need us.
This ironically illustrates the self-isolation that witnesses engage in, right? Because as a witness, you are constantly encouraged to go to a library or a respected source of information like an encyclopedia or like an official governmental website like the CDC or the World Health Organization. Just kidding. You're encouraged to go to jw.org. When you do research, you are supposed to do research in the database of publications by your leaders past and present.
What do you think I need to do to change?
How about we search for Good for Building Up from the online library?
Sounds good. Let's take a look.
Kenneth Cook cites an article written by his own subordinates in his talk in order to direct people to practical wisdom. Like, hey, you know what was really great is this article that was in the official website of the thing that I'm the head of with my buddies.
To have a friend, we must be a friend.
So be a friend.
Could you reach out to someone this week? Perhaps you can think of a friend whom you haven't been able to talk with for some time.
Maybe a family member or a friend you've shunned for a long time? Could you maybe apologize and say, hey, that was kind of messed up, that I just started shunning you one day because of our religious differences. Let's be friends again, maybe. Can you forgive me for that?
The joy of speaking with your friend will no doubt calm some of the anxieties in your heart. We can't wait to get back to our kingdom halls, assembly halls, to have our large regional conventions, special conventions, and even international conventions.
In the meantime,
we are grateful that we have other means to enjoy these programs, such as Zoom, JW Stream, and in some cases,
TV and radio.
Here, Kenneth Cook reiterates that they are definitely interested in going back to Kingdom Halls and having large conventions, and I think that might be in part because in the XJW community, and even among witnesses, there has been speculation like, maybe we aren't going back, because it's kind of been a while, and, you know, a lot of churches have returned, and they just make people wear masks and sit far apart. But here he seems to be quashing those rumors, and just my personal opinion, I think if you think they don't want to go back to Kingdom Halls as soon as possible, I think you're nuts. I think social interaction in an actual physical space, the love bombing, is such an important part of witness conversion. It's the thing that draws people in. Most people who convert will say, you know, I don't remember what the talk was about at my first meeting. What I remember is the love and friendship that I received from the congregation. So they want that back. Zoom is just naturally going to be colder and less warm and inviting than a Kingdom Hall. A Zoom convention doesn't have the same endorphin rush as seeing thousands of your fellow brothers and sisters. That's exciting. It makes you feel like you're really a part of something big and important. So I thought it was interesting that he went out of his way to reassure the audience, yeah, we do want to go back.
Of course, most congregations are using Zoom for their meetings. Isn't it encouraging to see our brothers and sisters' faces? We appreciate being able to see them comment and see them singing from the heart. This also helps us to fight feelings of isolation.
This is a totally minor point. It's just something that I've been kind of wanting to bring up, but I just haven't had a chance to do it. Kenneth Cook says, we appreciate seeing their faces and seeing their comments. And this is just normal part of witness speak. You are always told what you already appreciate, suggesting you should be appreciating this. Darn it.
We appreciate being able to see them comment and see them singing from the heart.
We appreciate that. Right, everybody? Language like that subtly reinforces to witnesses how they should already be feeling and can implant little seeds of guilt if they aren't feeling like that. This is a way to kind of shame people who don't turn their cameras on during the meeting, because he's saying, we appreciate seeing your face.
Show us your face.
Simply turning your camera on and smiling, even a simple wave, can be such an encouragement to others. And we can make it our goal to connect early and stay longer after the meeting. We can enjoy visiting with the friends in breakout rooms. Brothers and sisters, these are some practical ways that we can fight back against feelings of isolation
and the anxiety that isolation can create in our hearts.
I don't want to be mean-spirited, but isn't that kind of just the saddest thing you ever heard? Just turning on your camera, just a wave can be so encouraging, and I know that that's how witnesses talk, and I hear people say these things like, oh, I saw them, it was so encouraging to see them waving into the camera on the Zoom meeting. And it's just like, I don't know. I think I'm a less cynical person generally than I was as a witness. But when I hear stuff like that, I'm just like, oh, screw Zoom meetings, man. I have to do them for work. They suck. I am actively discouraged the more people I see turning on their camera, because that peer pressures me into turning on my camera. So I don't know. I might not put this in. I just was, that made me cringe a little bit. Sorry, witnesses watching.
Another danger that Jesus mentioned
Was heavy drinking.
Of course, there's nothing wrong with drinking alcohol in moderation. The scriptures describe wine as a gift from God, designed to make the heart rejoice. But some caution is needed. Why? Remember, Jesus specifically cautioned that our hearts could become weighed down with heavy drinking. Secular reports indicate that many people have increased their alcohol consumption during the pandemic. The article, Alcohol Consumption, How Can You Stay in Control on JW.org states, some people drink more alcohol when they feel stressed, lonely, or simply bored. Are you drinking more than you used to? If so, how can you make sure that your drinking does not get out of hand or lead to alcohol dependence?
Again, a little weird that he refers to apparently some actual study, but he just refers to it as a secular study, some secular source. Who even cares where that came from? I've got an actual reference for you. JW.org, official website of my little religion that I run with my friends. Yeah, there's a big drinking problem within Jehovah's Witnesses. It's just kind of an unspoken thing. Witnesses like to drink. I know I did. I drink significantly less now that I am not a witness. Yeah, you can watch a lot of testimonies from former Bethelites talking about the drinking culture there, including governing body members past and present. There is heavy speculation, which is corroborated by actual evidence, that Tony Morris is a bit of a Scotchman. Couldn't think of a single euphemism for a drunk person. Not a single one came to mind. Famously, we have Bottlegate, in which Tony Morris was caught on a Sunday morning when he should have been at the meeting buying a cart full of thousands of dollars worth of Macallan's scotch, a famously expensive brand of scotch that your boy over here had to use part of his Christmas bonus to buy. Then I had to have surgery and I haven't even been able to drink it. So yeah, it's a little precious to hear him warning about that, but I mean, it is good advice. I don't think it's any secret that people have been drinking more during the pandemic. It's kind of become a meme, and it's good advice to not overindulge in drink. So I don't actually have a problem with this. I just thought it was a little rich that he won't cite the secular source.
Immoderate drinking can weigh our hearts down and cause us to neglect spiritual things. It can cause us to slow down in the race for life, or even to stop running altogether. No wonder Jesus specifically mentioned it when discussing the need to keep awake spiritually. Why not review that article
on jw.org,
which features 5 tips to help us keep alcohol in its proper place?
Now isn't this interesting? He's not so much concerned with the health problems associated with drinking, is he, Kenneth Cook? He's more concerned about the fact that, hey, if you're drinking all the time, it'll probably affect the amount of free labor you're able to do for the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. Here's where I indulge in irresponsible, wild speculation, but, this is how people with drinking problems who are witnesses justify the drinking problems to themselves. I've known elders with pretty severe drinking problems, but when they're elders and they are super active in the congregation and they're pioneering and they're doing all this stuff, they feel like, listen, this isn't affecting my worship to Jehovah, so it must not be that big of a problem. See, this thing of giving somebody the parameter of it could affect your worship is actually a little dangerous because it ignores the real problem, which is this will kill you and destroy your life and the lives of your family and friends. But don't worry about that so much. He just wants to make sure that you're logging those service hours. Looks good on the year-end reports.
What is another potential danger to our spiritual alertness? Misuse of social media.
I knew it! I knew it. I knew social media was going to work its way into this. Bets. Okay, let's place bets. Are we going to get a mention of apostates? All right, I bet $10 to you, the listener. I'm good for it, I swear, that there's going to be a mention of apostates. Bet you anything.
There's been a lot of concern from governmental and medical authorities about the effect that social media is having on people's mental and emotional health.
Even more important
are the spiritual concerns, the content, the people, and the amount of time involved.
It can be addictive.
Brothers and sisters, if you decide to allow your family to use social media, please be alert. Make sure you have good association with those who promote good spiritual habits, whether on screen or off.
At this point, I am getting antsy. I am thinking maybe I am not going to be keeping this crisp $10 bill in my pocket. It seems like this is actually more about the anti-vax concerns and the, political neutrality stuff. So let's see.
The whiteboard animation, Be Social Network Smart, provides some good reminders on how to be balanced yet cautious when using social media. What's the final challenge we want to consider?
Tests of neutrality.
With so many different challenging situations in the world, and even the threat of war in some countries, we need to be sure that we are not allowing our hearts to take sides on these issues. How sad it has been to see simple public health measures like wearing masks, hand washing, physical distancing, and vaccinations become controversial, even political. Some of our brothers and sisters have been influenced by the political views of those in their community.
This is, sorry, I'm trying to pause this thing. This is tough to hear, that some have even been influenced by the political ideas of some in their community. It's pretty tough.
Some have turned to the internet and have been
deeply influenced
by official appearing websites filled with highly political propaganda.
Okay, if I'm Kenneth Cook, I'm a little worried at this point. I'm on thin ice anyway. I'm walking the tightrope, and it's thin and icy, this tightrope, in my example. All my expressions worked in tandem with each other, because he's saying that there's a lot of propaganda on these websites, and if he wants to actually help his members not get misinformed by shady Facebook bullshit, which is, I'm assuming, is what he's talking about, is all the official appearing websites, then he's going to have to actually describe what propaganda is and how it works and how it tricks people. And that could be a dangerous path for him to go down. I read once in this really official appearing website that I actually see advertised all over the place, like train stations and downtown, kind of on the city streets. I see this thing advertised everywhere. The King of the North mentioned in the Bible represents Russia and its allies, and that in the year 1914, Christ invisibly began ruling in heaven, which we know a lot in part because of a dream that a guy had a long time ago, and the start of World War I. I read that on a pretty official looking website, and now I'm wondering if I should double check that information, because it sounded pretty awesome and there were really nice pictures and charts and stuff, so it felt pretty real. Now, I hate to start this gambling thing. I've avoided gambling my entire life, and for some reason this video is doing something, but I've got this, I'm already $10 in the hole, another 10 that he does not describe what propaganda is, and he just says, be careful. Or he references some obscure article on jw.org. This feels like a safe bet, and I'm going to be kind of pissed if I'm out $20 at the end of this video.
Brothers and sisters, be careful. Just because something appears on an official-looking web page on the internet does not make it true. We must guard against the spirit of the world and remain neutral. How appropriate are Jesus' words, "Pay attention to yourselves, that your hearts never become weighed down." Let's keep focused on God's kingdom as the only solution to this world's problems.
Now, hang on, because Kenneth Cook just said we have to rely on God's kingdom as the only solution to the world's problems, while at the same time, the governing body is heavily pushing the vaccine as a solution to the problem of COVID-19, probably one of the at least top 3 biggest problems facing the world right now, like the entire world, all of it. And God's kingdom hasn't done anything about COVID-19. It seems to be relying on like scientists and virologists and people who have dedicated their lives to understanding diseases and how to cure them. That seems to be more of where the solutions are coming from. And the kingdom seems to be doing a lot of letter writing, for sure. People are they're getting letters with like tracts and magazines and stuff. That's for sure happening. But I have not seen a ton of vaccines and practical medical help for hospitals and extra PPE for nurses and doctors coming out of the Watchtower headquarters. But if I'm wrong, please correct me.
What has helped some families to keep awake? Let's see as we watch the following video.
During the pandemic, it was definitely difficult to keep a good routine, and it was very easy to form bad habits.
During isolation, I spent more time in front of the computer, and it disturbed my sleep pattern.
I had to make an adjustment because with bad habits, they're easy to form and hard to break. So I did a little bit of a replacement therapy, I call it, where you switch from mindless TV watching to something that's a little bit more profitable, which is our own TV station, JW Broadcasting.
Profitable is an interesting word to use. There's a couple of videos on JW Broadcasting that I could cite that tell the members to donate money, even the little kids, as a matter of fact. And that is more profitable for some people. That is true.
As I spent a lot of time watching television, I heard a lot of negative information about vaccination. I was frightened.
I felt pressure from the media, and I decided not to get vaccinated for some time. We often ask Jehovah for guidance. The governing body updates were timely and helped us to make the right decisions.
This part is interesting, and it is the double-edged sword of the faithful members of Jehovah's Witnesses' implicit and unwavering trust in the governing body. Because in this instance, the governing body told everybody to do a good, helpful thing, which is to get vaccinated. That's good. Good to get vaccinated. And this guy says he wouldn't have without the governing body updates. So, hey, I want this freaking pandemic to be over. I want COVID to become something that's just like the common cold, so it's not a huge deal if you catch it and you don't have to go to the hospital and be put on a ventilator and maybe die. So let's be clear, because I don't want my message to get twisted. This is good, unequivocally good, that this happened. You also wonder, this is a guy who didn't want to do a thing until the governing body told him to do the thing. So that's the level of power that they have. They can convince people to do things that they don't want to do, even with regards to their bodies.
And maybe the kinds of Kool-Aid they're drinking.
No, I don't know. I'm just saying they can get people to do stuff they don't want to do, and that can be used for good or for ill. And a lot of times, like the other 99% of the times, it's bad stuff, like convincing people to shun their children or children to shun their parents. And a lot of the times, it's convincing people not to get life-saving medical treatment, like a blood transfusion. I would be dead twice over this year. I had to get another one when I was in the hospital for this surgery. So let's keep that in mind too. They also have the power to get people to avoid life-saving medical treatment, and they exercise that power even more heavily.
When the pandemic first started, I had a lot of free time on my hands, so I was just on social media all the time, or on technology all the time.
Family worship was an excellent opportunity for us to be able to talk about social media, to really get Jehovah's thinking on it and how we can balance it while not eliminating it completely so that we controlled it and it didn't control us.
It was a slow process, but eventually I deleted my social media and began setting time limits for other apps that would take a lot of my time.
Our family decided to spend more time together.
Just normal families like yours sitting around in their living room in full suits and Sunday best dresses, by the way.
We played music and danced together. We played board games.
And went for walks together in the forest.
That helped us to reduce the time we used for social media.
I decided to keep my schedule busy. So I started a few new hobbies like knitting and gardening.
I saw a lot of benefit in staying close to the congregation through Zoom. Even though Zoom is not easy for me, being able to spend time with people who are going through the same thing as I was really beneficial. We could all talk about what we were dealing with and encourage each other as well.
We arranged online Bible-based games through Zoom.
Gotta be honest, online Bible-based games via Zoom, that's an L. That sounds like the worst thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. Just to be perfectly honest, and as is established, I almost died twice this year.
I found it nice to use Zoom to connect with the congregation, with events that were planned by those in our hall. Some of them were interviews with those who have been in our hall for a long time. So it was nice to hear those experiences and be able to draw closer to them.
During the pandemic, I would reach out to others, either a phone call or a little card or a text message or just dropping something off at someone's door. And it helped me to feel closer to my brothers and sisters too.
The governing body updates were an absolute lifeline.
They were something that really helped to focus all of our activity. As parents, it helped us to have clear direction, so we felt like we were guided through the whole pandemic and encouraged at the same time.
We are proud of these families for keeping awake to spiritual dangers. Did you notice how they counteracted social isolation? They have reached out to others regularly. They use video conferencing to stay close to their congregations and dear friends. Did you notice how they address their use of social media?
Did you notice how they did all the things that I was just talking about? Totally unplanned. Isn't that incredible? Listen, all of this is fine and good. I think it's good to limit your social media use. Hypothetically, I don't do that. I'm on Twitter all day, every day, and it's a crippling problem, and it has ruined many relationships. My life is in shambles because of that specifically. But hypothetically, for other people, that sounds like a great idea. But what you notice is this helped us to stay focused on serving the organization. And the thing that's really tone deaf about this stuff is when it's described as being a lifeline. These are governing body updates. That's what they're called. They're called governing body updates. So this is a huge ego boost to the governing body. This is like that ego boost that Vladimir Putin got earlier that I was talking about. This stuff they're putting out, videos of them talking to the camera, encouraging the flock, that's a lifeline. But it's so tone deaf because there are 8 million witnesses in the world and there are about 8 billion other people. And what are all these other people doing, do you think? Do you think that they're all just wallowing in despair without the governing body updates? Where they say things like, this is the last of the last days, right before the last of the last days and the last minutes of the days and whatever that weird-faced guy said. Like, let's be real here. Witnesses are doing no better and no worse than any other group of people. Actually, statistically, in terms of deaths, they are doing worse than other groups of people. So this idea that there is some exclusive or special nature to the governing body updates, which are dry, lifeless talks giving the most basic human advice that you could possibly get.
Friendships benefit your mental and emotional health.
All the while reminding people to serve the religion. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just not convinced. I know that Kenneth Cook specifically was trying to convince me to come back. The organization we've had a thing for a while. I won't get into it.
Very soon, Jehovah's day will come upon all the earth. It's vital that we keep awake. Now's not the time to become spiritually drowsy or distracted.
Why is that again? Why don't we want to become drowsy or distracted? Oh, because we don't want to drift away from the organization and be destroyed at Armageddon. That's what all this is about, by the way. I just feel like it's important to reiterate because witnesses really like to downplay this fact, even just within themselves, to get through the day. You just about have to. But yeah, what he's talking about, boy, I got this in my ear. What he's talking about is you have to do all this stuff and stay close to the organization and do everything I'm saying and reread those articles. Why don't you do that for family worship? You have to do that so you don't die at Armageddon, okay, please? So I thought this was cringe and bad, and I wish I hadn't spent an hour and 6 minutes. Oh boy. Well, however long this video is, it ain't gonna be that long.